peanut butter, jelly, and bread. These are all the exact same products, but they're from 4 different stores and at 4 different prices. $17.27 from Gristedes here in New York City, $11.51 on Amazon, $10.49 at Walmart, and $8.53 for these. Literally half the price of these, but it's also a full 18% less than even Walmart. How is that possible? Now, of course, grocery prices are as high as they've ever been, and you probably even know a lot of the reasons why. More Perfect Union has been covering how consolidation, algorithmic pricing, and price maximization have made grocery shopping nearly impossible for most Americans. But despite a 28% increase in grocery prices since just 2020, doesn't it sometimes feel like no one is actually doing anything about it? Well, this isn't one of those YouTube videos where we just talk about all the things that are broken in our economy. In this video, we're going to talk about a real solution that could alter your family grocery trips. There are 2 politicians who talk a lot about groceries.
Grocery store, cheaper groceries. Groceries.
That would be New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani.
Still waiting for the cost of groceries to go down.
And Trump.
Groceries? Grocery bills.
The groceries went through the roof.
Zohran Mamdani's answer to this is government-owned grocery stores. These would be nonprofit stores set up as a public utility. But this isn't a new idea. And as critics will tell you, we've tried it, and they don't work. From Florida,
the town of Baldwin is expected to close its only grocery store.
To Kansas,
the future of a city-owned grocery store in Erie, Kansas is up in the air once again.
To Kansas City.
But it did close the Sun Fresh near 31st and Prospect.
Now, there are a few reasons people give for why this keeps happening and why government-run grocery stores don't have a great track record or even just can't work. Here are 3 of the most common arguments I see over and over again.
First of all, it's basic economics.
Number 1 is that the numbers just don't add up.
The profit margin in a grocery store is 1 or 2%.
Critics will tell you that grocery stores are already just barely scraping by. Private grocers aggressively optimize inventory and labor. They buy on massive scales, whereas government-run stores might have procurement rules or political oversight. They would likely be smaller operations, so less leverage over suppliers. So it's effectively impossible to turn a profit. And if you can't turn a profit, or at least break even, so the critics say, the taxpayer will pick up the bill and it won't be worth it. Number 2, do we want a government agency deciding what food we have access to?
Yeah, well, it's about social control.
Because critics argue that a government grocery store won't have the same kind of pressure to honor consumer demand. Inventory could end up being decided by politics. And ultimately, Zohran's idea for a chain of city-owned grocery stores would increase government involvement in our lives, writes Representative Jen Kiggins from Virginia. Number 3, a lot of government agencies just suck. So why wouldn't this one?
Oh, the government stinks. The lines are too long at the DMV.
Essentially, the bureaucracy and slow decision-making that make the DMV or the Social Security office inefficient or unresponsive or just unpleasant would carry over into your shopping experience.
Regulating a really low profit margin industry with opaque prices, I'm just not sure the state can handle it.
So really, the critics say, privatization becomes the only serious answer. I'm going to break down each of these arguments for you by the end of this video, but whatever critics might have to say, and we can take a guess as to how Trump might feel about government-run grocery stores.
We want government out of our business, out of our wallets, and out of our lives. This is what we want.
He kind of already has them, because the largest chain of government-run grocery stores, and it's where this sandwich is from, is run by the military.
My name is Bill Moore. I am the former CEO and director of the Defense Commissary Agency.
Bill oversaw the almost 250 commissaries across the country and around the world, from South Carolina to South Korea. And his mission at the agency was very simple.
The Defense Commissary Agency is a global grocery chain whose mission is to provide groceries to military families at significantly lower prices.
This dates back to 1825, when the Army started selling goods to military personnel from commissary department storehouses. Before long, the privilege was extended from officers to enlisted men, and over the years, it's really come to be seen as a significant non-pay benefit of being in the military. One retiree in 1979 said it like this: In 1946, when I joined the service, I was told that certain things would happen if I lived through 20 years and didn't get killed in combat. I'm entitled to commissaries. It's part of the deal. In the late 1800s, while the rest of the country's food supply was consolidating and privatizing, the military made the decision to build their own retail system rather than plug into what the rest of the country was doing. And by the 1930s, the commissary was extended from service members to their families, such that spouses and dependents could shop at commissaries by themselves. I decided that to fully understand how the commissary works, I needed to go out and talk to one of these military families.
So we are here in West Point where we're going to meet Rachel Sally, and she's going to tell us about all things commissary.
Nice to meet you.
Rachel and her family live on post here at West Point. She runs a successful travel agency, and her husband, who is a captain in the US Army, teaches history here. The commissary is their primary grocery store.
It's super helpful here, plus there's only one other grocery store in town. So the options here, if you need something in a pinch, like just go to the commissary.
Sure. Yeah. How much is your monthly food budget?
In a perfect world, try to stay under $1,000 for the month, and we really only eat out like once a week.
But actually, on average, households of 3 to 4 people spend almost $1,500 a month on groceries. Rachel was super nice and even let me and cameraman Evan follow her around the commissary while she shopped. We weren't allowed to film inside, but the first thing we noticed was that it really just felt like, well, as Rachel put it,
like it's a normal grocery store.
Now, I was shocked at what I saw in the commissary because the New York Post had written that government-owned grocery stores led to Soviet-style markets that left customers stuck with just one brand or generic brands of items like bread and milk. Well, that definitely wasn't the case there. And in fact, the commissary seems quite responsive to consumer demands. DECA has altered their entire pricing model to address customer feedback.
The commissary model for many, many years was to sell all products at cost plus 1%.
This is called a cost plus model, and they would do this across the board. So if the commissary bought paper towels for $13, they sold it for $13.13. If they bought a loaf of bread for $2.50, they sold it for $2.55.
But frankly, it created a perception with our customers that we were not saving them money.
See, there are these things called known value items, or KVIs.
So think milk, eggs, cheese.
So usually a grocery store will sell you milk for less than they paid for it.
I probably shouldn't mention a specific company, but these large stores right outside of installations, they would sell a gallon of milk for $2.50. We were selling milk at cost for $5.
And so that gave the perception that everything was more expensive when in total, everything was still cheaper. But DECA was responsive and implemented what's called a variable pricing model.
We started selling milk at a loss, and we would recover that loss in other products, but products that weren't as important to a struggling military family.
The thing is that there are other grocery stores to shop at, which is why DECA is laser focused on maintaining the relevance of the commissary benefit. Because if there were systemic dissatisfaction and DECA started bleeding customers, it could also lead to any number of consequences, including DoD investigations and congressional hearings. The next thing we noticed was that prices were definitely lower than what we're used to. But how is this possible? Because even private grocery stores just squeak by on 1% profit margins.
How much money do you think you save?
I do feel like the savings compared to like the nearby grocery stores is huge.
DECA by law has to provide a 23.7% savings on average.
But key to understanding how those savings are achieved is understanding DECA's funding. The Defense Commissary Agency is part of the defense budget. DECA gets about $1.5 billion a year. This is the primary way they're able to save military families money. So in a sense, yeah, the critics are right. Profit margins are extremely thin, and if you want to save working families appreciable amounts of money, you're gonna have to create subsidies. And guess what? At one point, in an effort to fight food insecurity, the Defense Secretary asked Bill what he could do to help military families even more.
I said, well, with some additional funding, we can at least increase the savings to a round number of 25%. They increased our budget, so the subsidy became greater, which allowed us to lower the prices.
So maybe you take all this to mean that it's true. The secret to all this is that taxpayers foot the bill for some giant subsidy. But actually, the subsidy is quite small. The defense budget is almost $1 trillion, and the subsidy for DECA is roughly 0.2% for the whole defense budget. This is for almost 250 stores serving 8.8 million households. It's actually a small enough amount that theoretically, if New York City wanted to pay for it all by themselves, they could do so with a 1% tax increase only on households earning $1 million a year. But even though this is a relatively small amount of money, there is a constant push to become self-sufficient and cut the funding entirely. President Ford and President Carter favored eliminating the taxpayer subsidy, and the alternative is always to privatize. The thinking goes that this will unlock efficiencies. Consider something like the fact that Walmart owns its own distribution.
They own their distribution system. You know, they have centers, they have their own trucks. We did not have that luxury. I would have loved to have gotten that, but that would have been a huge startup cost involved.
So there you go. That's a foregone efficiency, right? But the thing is that those efficiencies also have costs.
When I came in to run DECA, Congress told me to run it like a business. I said, okay, I'll run it like a business. So I came back to the Hill with a list of stores I wanted to close. They were like, oh, you can't close any stores. Are you crazy? And I was like, you told me to run it like a business. These stores are losing money every single day. And they were like, well, you can't close any stores. I said, well, then stop asking me to run it like a business.
Because the reality is, this is exactly how food deserts happen. If a certain location isn't profitable, it doesn't matter how many people rely on it, that location closes. But commissaries are a service that operate outside of that model.
Privatization is really a politically correct term that is really saying we're going to eliminate a pretty important benefit to military families.
There are already a lot of families who are maybe like lower enlisted families, or maybe they have a lot of kids. Like, just because you have more kids doesn't mean you get extra money. You know what I mean? So like, it would be pretty painful on military families if the funding was gone.
I spent a lot of time in commissaries as a kid, and I hated that trip because we'd pass grocery stores to get there. And my mom would tell me, hey, just be glad you're in this car because we afford this car by buying our groceries at the commissary and not buying them on the outside.
When Rachel and I got back from the trip, she had spent about $206. I recreated her cart online at a nearby Walmart, and the bill came to roughly $247.
When you hear about groceries being unaffordable, do you feel like that's a problem that maybe doesn't affect you as much, or you've escaped, sort of?
I definitely feel lucky that we have like the commissary in our back pocket.
It's for these reasons that DECA has kept its funding and even has the support of people who would otherwise be hostile to the idea. Remember that Republican congresswoman from earlier who warned about city-owned grocery stores meaning more government involvement in our lives? And she's also tweeted that Sunday afternoons are for grocery shopping at the commissary. I save an average of $2 to $3 off my favorite Tillamook chocolate peanut butter ice cream when I buy it on base. And in fact, Kiggins protected DECA from privatization efforts, saying that no private entity can both profitably operate these facilities and deliver the statutory 23.7% savings required by law. So I guess Jen Kiggins is a fan of socialism.
There are a lot of things the Army has figured out, and the way to make this government-funded grocery store work, I mean, it helps and it works. It would be cool, you know, to see that like across the board.
Consumers and taxpayers already effectively subsidize large grocery chains. Kroger alone pays $2.2 billion a year in dividends to shareholders. The CEO of Walmart brings in $27 million a year in income, but consumers get high grocery prices and food deserts. On the other hand, the commissary model proves that it is possible for the government to run a very large, successful grocery chain that doesn't rely on maximizing profits. But the grocery industry isn't going to go down without a fight. Trade groups like the National Supermarket Association spend huge sums of money lobbying politicians. And then you have people like billionaire John Catsimatidis.
What's your prediction if the government owns and operates grocery stores?
They're going to go broke.
Who's going to go broke?
The government will end up going broke. You're going to end up like Havana.
Which may seem dramatic, but Governor Kathy Hochul takes him seriously enough to show up to an event Catsimatidis hosted to say that she also supports free enterprise. So the question is not, can the government run grocery stores? They do. The question is, who's going to make this happen, and who's going to stand in the way? Thanks for watching. Before you go, please support our work by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We're always looking to tell more stories like this one, unpacking big solutions to the economic problems that impact all of our daily lives. What other issues do you want to see us cover? Sound off in the comments, and again, don't forget to like and subscribe.